Today we are going to talk about the evolution of safety in Formula One over the years. So let's get started. The history of helmets. Let's start with the long history of helmets in Formula One. Interestingly, in the early years of Formula One in 1950 and 51, it was not compulsory to use a helmet. And so most drivers only used a windshield for the eyes and a leather hood for the head. As time went on, safety awareness slowly increased, and in 1952, helmets became compulsory in Formula One. In the long history of the sport, helmets have been continuously improved and further developed. And in the late 60s and early 70s, open face helmets were replaced by closed ones. But that is not all. In 2003, the hand system was introduced, which has saved many injuries and lives and is used far beyond Formula One. The head and neck support is pulled over the driver's shoulder and then attached to the helmet with a strap. This secures the pilot's head, preventing it from flying forward in the event of an accident. The current helmets are also constantly being improved, especially after 2009 when a steel spring flew against Felipe Massa's helmet at a speed of 250 km per hour. Since then, the helmets have been fitted with a resistant rope strip above the visor, which is even said to be bulletproof and thus prevents serious injuries. In the newer models, this bar is already built into the helmets, making these helmets among the safest in the world. This example clearly shows that every little detail is constantly being developed and that the company is always striving to be at the cutting edge of technology. Safety belts. The history of seat belts in Formula One is unimaginable today, as a proper seatbelt requirement was only introduced in Formula One in 1972. Before that, seatbelts were unpopular with most drivers and were associated with concerns rather than self-protection. The reason for this was various fires that occurred in accidents in the 50s. This led to terrible accidents and deaths. For this reason, many drivers decided not to fasten their seatbelts or to fasten them incorrectly in order to get out of the car more quickly in the event of a fire. Among others, this was the fate of the Austrian driver Jochen Rindt, who was killed in an accident in Monza in 1970. He most likely suffered serious injuries because he was not wearing his seatbelt correctly. Ironically, Rindt actually became Formula One world champion in 1970 without having started in the last 3 races, finishing the season in first place with a 5-point lead, but he did not live to see this world championship title. The consequences of the accident were drawn 2 years later when the use of seatbelts became compulsory in Formula One in 1972. The racing suit. In the 50s, people still raced in normal shirts and leather gloves. It wasn't until the 60s that people really started to think about fireproof suits. A pioneer of this movement at this time was Jackie Stewart, who was very committed to the safety of pilots and was himself one of the first to use a fireproof suit. It was not until the 70s that it became compulsory for drivers to wear fireproof suits. However, this meant that the suits were very heavy and very uncomfortable, as 5-layer fabric was still used at the time. Nowadays, almost every racing class uses a fabric called Nomex, which is not only very light, but also very heat resistant. Vehicle safety. The development of cars made the sport not only faster, but also much safer. The vehicles became much more robust and were equipped with many new life-saving features. For example, the Halo system was first introduced in 2016, which initially met with a lot of criticism, but proved to save the lives of many drivers. It makes up the strongest part of the car and can carry up to 12 tons. Furthermore, the vehicles were fitted with the roll bar, which prevents the driver from hitting their head on the ground in the event of a rollover. In addition, the cars have tire ropes which prevent the tires from spinning uncontrollably on the track in the event of a tire loss. But the most important invention is probably the monocoque. The monocoque has been around since the 60s, but only really caught on from 1981 when McLaren used carbon for the monocoque because it was very light and offered much greater protection in the event of an accident. As a result, the carbon monocoque became the safety standard. The introduction of new rules. Over the course of time, more and more thought was given to how Formula One could be made safer in order to avoid accidents and fatalities. In the 1970s, for example, the safety car was introduced to increase safety. This resulted in many complex rules that significantly improved safety. One of the latest changes, for example, is the virtual safety car. The racetracks. Not only the cars, but also the tracks have been given new and improved safety standards that are taking the sport in a more modern direction. One of the most important aspects here is the type of track barriers. At the beginning of Formula One, bales of straw were mainly used. Honestly, whose brilliant idea was that? The straw bales are cheap and easy to set up, but have the big disadvantage that in the event of an accident, slippery straw is spread all over the track and straw is very flammable and burns very well. That's not really practical when you consider that a Formula One car can get several hundred degrees hot. This proved fatal for driver Lorenzo Bandini. Baldini crashed into a crash barrier in the 1967 Monaco race. This not only caused his car to catch fire, but also the bales of straw, making it almost impossible to get Baldini out of the car. So he could only be removed from the car after 3 minutes and died of his injuries. Bales of straw were banned from 1970. This was followed by a switch to wire fences, which had the disadvantage of deforming badly in the event of accidents. Carlos Reutemann barely survived when he drove into a wire fence at the South Africa qualifying in 1981, causing the wire fence around Reutemann's neck to deform and almost strangle him. He was lucky and could be rescued by the marshals. Then finally came the time of tyre stacks in Formula One. The advantage of tyres as impact protection is their high deformability, which means they can absorb a lot of energy in the event of an accident. They can also be stacked high or low as required and in several rows. The inexpensive and flexible tyre stacks have prevailed to this day and, together with the newer Tech Pro barriers, offer a high level of protection. However, not only the track demarcations were improved, but also many tracks that had to be extensively rebuilt for safety reasons or were even completely removed from the race calendar. In 2007, for example, the San Marino Grand Prix was removed from the racing calendar as the circuit was no longer considered to be up to date. Furthermore, the presence of people on the racetrack was not nearly as strictly regulated as it is today. It was almost considered normal to be on the racetrack. As a result, it was not uncommon for accidents to occur, such as at the 1953 Argentine Grand Prix, when Italian racing driver Giuseppe Farina tried to avoid a child running onto the track, but his car left the track and crashed into a crowd of spectators. Several people died in this accident and many more were injured.